So, what is justice, really? It's a question we've been asking ourselves forever. Today, we're going to explore it through a pretty dramatic story, a plot against an entire people, and we'll see how that deep, deep hunger for a final reckoning literally reshaped our entire understanding of what happens after we die. Our story kicks off with a title that just stops you in your tracks. Two genocides and one party. I mean, how do those things even go together? Well, it sets the stage for a story that begins with the most incredible luxury you can imagine and ends with a plan for total annihilation. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the massive Persian Empire ruled by King Ahasuerus. You might know him as Xerxes. And this king, he decides he's going to throw a party. But we're not talking about a weekend get-together. Nope. This is a celebration of his own power and glory that's going to last for half a year. The scale here is just mind-boggling. For 180 days, all the princes and nobles from 127 different lands are feasting, all to show off the king's glorious majesty. And if that wasn't enough, it's followed by another 7-day party for every single person in the capital city. Just try to picture it. Marble floors, fine linens, and wine just flowing, served in unique golden goblets for everybody. This was an empire at the absolute peak of its power. So right in the middle of all this extravagance, three key people take the stage. First, you've got the king, who's powerful but, maybe a little easily influenced. Then there's his new queen, Esther. She was chosen for her beauty, but she's hiding a huge secret. She's Jewish. And then there's Haman, the king's most trusted advisor, a man just filled with this poisonous hatred. And Haman's hatred leads to this absolutely horrifying plan. He actually convinces the king to sign a decree to completely exterminate every Jewish person in the entire empire, men, women, and children, a state-sanctioned genocide, all scheduled to happen on one single terrible day. This story from the Book of Esther becomes this desperate ticking clock race for justice here on Earth. Esther's story is all about that desperate fight for justice in the here and now. But it makes you ask a much bigger, much tougher question. What about all the Hamans throughout history who do get away with it? What happens when earthly justice just fails? This is a problem that humanity has been wrestling with for thousands of years. To even begin to find an answer, we have to go way back and look at our earliest ideas about what comes after death. You see, the search for ultimate justice is completely tied up with the very idea of an afterlife. In the ancient world, you kind of see two different ways of thinking about this. On one hand, you have the Mesopotamian story of Gilgamesh. He goes on this epic quest to find personal immortality. He finds a plant that grants eternal youth, and then a snake steals it. It's this tragic, individual loss. But in the biblical story, immortality isn't something one person finds. It was something all of humanity lost when the way back to the tree of life was blocked. So this early biblical worldview, it had a very specific idea about what happens when you die. And let me tell you, if you were looking for some kind of cosmic justice, it was deeply unsatisfying. The idea was called the realm of the dead, or dødsriket, and it was basically this gray, shadowy place where everyone, and I mean everyone, went, no matter how they lived their life. The good, the evil, kings, servants, they all ended up in the exact same neutral void. Death was the great equalizer, and nothing you did on Earth mattered in the end. And for centuries, that was the answer. Justice was something you had to find on Earth, because the afterlife offered nothing. A tyrant and his victims, they'd share the exact same silent fate. But this lack of a final accounting, it was a huge problem, a kind of spiritual vacuum that a powerful new idea was about to fill. So how in the world did we get from that one-size-fits-all gray void to the concepts of heaven and hell that we're so familiar with today? Well, the entire map of the afterlife had to be completely redrawn. And it all kicked off with one single revolutionary idea: resurrection. A major turning point comes in the book of Daniel. It introduces this idea that people will be raised from the dead to face one of two fates, either everlasting life or shame and everlasting contempt. All of a sudden, the afterlife isn't a neutral bus stop anymore. It's a place where a final judgment happens. This new way of thinking meant they needed new destinations, right? So the New Testament introduces a place called Hades. Now, this is really important. Hades isn't the final hell. It's more like a temporary holding place, a state of torment for the wicked while they wait for that final judgment. It's a huge shift from that old, unified realm of the dead. And you can see this new, divided reality perfectly in the story of the rich man and Lazarus. After they die, the poor man who is righteous is comforted in a place called Abraham's bosom. But the rich man who is wicked is in torment in Hades. And there is this great chasm that now separates the good from the evil, a separation that's there even before the final judgment day. But wait a second, if Hades is just a temporary stop, the waiting room, where's the place of final, eternal punishment? Well, the answer is surprisingly physical. The concept of hell, believe it or not, has a history, and it all began in a real valley just outside Jerusalem. That place is Gehenna. The name actually comes from the Valley of Hinnom, a real ravine that was once used for some pretty dark idol worship, and later on, it basically became the city's garbage dump, a place of constant waste and fire. So this real burning valley became this incredibly powerful metaphor for the final, eternal destination of the unrighteous. When you step back and look at this entire evolution of thought, from one neutral realm to this whole complex system of waiting rooms and final destinations, you realize it was all driven by one thing: a deep, profound human need to solve the problem of unpunished evil. I mean, you can just see the logic unfolding, step by step. First, death is just the end, period. But as soon as you introduce the idea of resurrection, well, you need a place for souls to wait for judgment. That gives us Hades. And of course, if there's a judgment, there has to be a final sentence and a place to carry it out: Gehenna. This desire for a just outcome is so absolute that some texts suggest it goes even beyond the grave. This quote talks about the gospel being preached even to those who are already dead, so that every single person, living or not, gets a chance to be judged fairly. It's an incredible commitment to the idea that nobody escapes a final accounting. So at the end of the day, this whole incredible journey, from one gray afterlife to this complex map of divine judgment, is really humanity's response to the problem of Haman. It's an attempt to build a system of cosmic justice that guarantees that people who do unimaginable evil on Earth will, in the end, be held accountable. So let's just pull all this together. We started with a story about the desperate need for human justice in the face of a planned genocide. From there, we traced how a whole new system of divine justice developed. These concepts we kind of take for granted now, like a divided afterlife, they weren't always there. They evolved over centuries to answer a burning human question: how do we find balance in a world where evil so often seems to win? And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This whole theological framework was built to make sure that justice is eventually served. So if that need is so fundamental to who we are that it literally reimagined eternity, what does that demand of us in our responsibility to pursue justice right here, right now?